Hey everybody, I'm Paul and this is Game Turtle, and today I'm going to be talking about Momodora. Momodora III is a game I came across on Steam one day, and I was immediately drawn in by its wonderful art style. As I looked into the game, I discovered that Momodora is an ongoing series of indie platformers on the PC. Over the last several years, 3 different games have been released, and have been developed primarily by one guy. I picked up the game, promptly beat it, then went off to find the previous 2 in the series. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to review all 3 in chronological order. The first Momodora game is very reminiscent of Cave Story, both in terms of gameplay and presentation. The plot and character designs of the series remind me of Cave Story by way of Toho Project, which is far from a poor combination. As far as plot goes, there isn't a huge amount going on. The protagonist's mother was sacrificed as part of a local religious custom, so Isadora travels to a forbidden land in order to bring her back from the dead. It's concise and mysterious, and fits in with the overall tone and design of the game, but doesn't get much focus as far as in-game explanations go. This is a shame, as the world has clearly been developed quite fully, and unfortunately I never really got a sense the game was letting me immerse myself in the game's world. Regardless, the plot is a driving force for the action, and in that sense it succeeds. The game takes place along a mostly linear path, with a bunch of hidden secrets along the way that branch off from the main trail. I would consider the level design good, if not great. There's room for improvement, but the different areas vary and offer their own challenges and obstacles. The levels do have a very similar visual design to those of Cave Story 2, with large blocks separated by curved slopes. Even the sprite work has a Cave Story vibe to it. Momodora 1 features some impressively tight controls. Isadora moves smoothly and the jump mechanics work well. As the game goes on, Isadora amasses an interesting assortment of weaponry, from the standard SMG and shotgun variants to guided missiles and her original slashing leaf weapon. Gameplay itself has a definite Cave Story vibe, but it brings its own spin on the action. Combat has more of a push towards melee combat, and areas are constructed to drive the player through combat situations more directly. The game isn't easy. The final area in particular took me a decent while to survive through, and the final boss took me even longer. It's one of those games where learning enemy patterns is the key to victory. I did also find some weapons aided me more than others, particularly during boss fights. Though I know that other weapons would lead to improved efficiency during combat if handled by a more skilled player. I didn't find any weapon in particular to lack in strength, and I'm sure that certain weaponry would favour different playstyles, which does add a nice bit of variety to each player's progress through the game, as well as for any subsequent playthroughs. Overall, the original Momodora game displays a wonderful level of polish, and is a fun, tight, little action platformer. The game has obvious ties to one of the creator's inspirations for better and worse. Despite this, it's an impressive achievement, even if it does cling to its Cave Story inspiration very closely. Momodora 1 is very good and has a lot of charm, but everything that's done well was improved upon in the sequel, Momodora II. Momodora 2 follows closely from the style of the original Momodora game. It still plays very similarly, but this sequel has more of a focus on explorational gameplay rather than a simple linear progression. In order to complete the game, the player must locate a number of objects throughout the expansive cave network of the game, which bolster the new protagonist Momo and allow her to reach the final confrontation. Unlike the first game, Momodora 2 follows Metroidvania design sensibilities, where the gradual amassing of items and weapons allow Momo to progress deeper into the caves and find hidden areas and items. The plot of the second Momodora game follows a tale of the new protagonist Momo as she sets out to banish the evil residing in the area near her village. Once again, the plot primarily serves as a character motivation and is rarely elaborated on during the game itself. However, unlike the original, more focus is put on characters that the player can meet throughout the journey. Momodora 2 is a much more open game than its predecessor. There are a number of branching paths throughout the vast cave network. Despite this, the environment is densely packed and I never had any difficulty finding my next objective. The map was compact enough that I could recall where to go when I gained a new ability, and so despite the fact that the area was more open, it still felt very skillfully laid out. 4 statues are spread across the map, and Momo must be blessed by each before she is able to reach the final area. The player gets taught how to interact with these statues through observation. In what is likely the first statue the player will come across, there's a girl crouching beside it. If the player goes to join the girl in crouching beside the statue, Momo gains the blessing of it. It's a great example of environmental teaching rather than using a tutorial prompt. I've always been a fan of in-universe explanations of player necessities. To save the game in Momodora II, you have to ring one of the blessing bells spread throughout the map. Whereas most games have a nondescript glowing area to save, or save access via menu, in Momodora II the character prays to the gods to restore their progress if they fail, which fits in well with this game world. There's a classic Zelda-style tennis energy ball battle at one point too, which I always enjoy. Combat has a lot of polish, and the game increases in mechanical complexity as progress is made. Abilities such as a boost move allow the player even greater control around obstacles and enemies. Overall, the gameplay is even smoother than the original, and the added movement options lend a lot to the experience. It also helps that the game looks and sounds wonderful. Sprite work is even nicer than in Momodora I, and the music is catchy and fits in brilliantly with the gameplay. The accompanying sound design is chunky and exciting. Where Momodora I felt like an experiment in that style of game design, Momodora II hones what worked in the original and offers plenty of alternative design decisions and alterations to make the game into a richer experience than before. Momodora II is an excellent game, and then came along Momodora III. Where number 2 saw the polishing and stripping back of unnecessary design elements into a more focused sequel, 3 takes that groundwork even further. Momodora III returns to a more linear map design of the original, but brings with it combat which feels the best of the series yet, and elevates the visual and sound design to a brilliant peak. The environments are richly colourful, and the thick, chunky pixel aesthetic looks the best it ever has. The game's backgrounds are beautiful, and the game's animation is wonderfully characterful. I'm a huge fan of the game's cutesy aesthetic. The game takes place 2 years after the events of Momodora II, and players take on the role of either of the previous protagonists, Momo Raynal or Isadora Doralina. The two girls have been tasked with investigating the strange paranormal goings-on near the village of Koho. As far as gameplay is concerned, it's more or less the same as 2. Action platforming with tight controls and weapon and item variety. The bosses are the most interesting they've been yet mechanically, and each has their own unique attack patterns. Momodora III might be the shortest game in the series yet, but it's quality from start to finish. The game also has a few extra achievements to strive towards, some of which even affect the narrative. Momodora III has an exceptionally cute art style. The sound design is pleasant and the music is enchanting. I actually stopped playing in a few areas to enjoy the soundtrack. The sprite work is fantastic, lending the game an absurd level of charm. The visuals have clearly grown and developed since the original game, as nice as they were then. The richness of the colour palette in Momodora III plays a large role in that, I think. In the original, the largest section of the game has a palette of reds and greys, whereas the final section in Momodora III has a beautiful white and pale blue background, that contrasts with the dark greys of the foreground. Parallax scrolling is used to great effect too. The visual design of the environments themselves has developed since the original. In the original, perfect square blocks would be dotted across the landscape, but in Momodora III, and to a lesser extent too, the environmental designs mask the grid-based nature of the areas far better. Momodora III reflects the skill and talent that can come with time and experience. Each Momodora game has been greater than the last, even considering its strong first game. It's a series encapsulating the indie scene, showing off the talents of a single developer and a small group of helpers. Each game served as a refinement of the last, and each feels like the developer experimenting with different ideas. The first 2 games are free on the developer's website, so I definitely recommend them. The 4th game is set to release in the coming months, and the game's been supported via Patreon with frequent updates and beta builds available to backers. The game is looking fantastic, honing the already impressive polish of Momodora III and improving the melee combat, adding dodge mechanics among other things. From my time with the beta, every slash attack has a terrific weight to it, and a brief hit stun on enemies, which in conjunction with the fantastic sprite work has a real nice game feel. All in all, I'm very excited to see where Momodora IV takes the series. Momodora is a series that I wish got more press, as it's a well-polished, slick collection of action platformers.